Imagine walking through the bustling streets of New Orleans in 1860, the sound of steamboats on the Mississippi River, traders shouting, horses clattering on cobblestone roads, and just beyond the main market, a quieter, hidden place. A place where young enslaved women were sold, not for labor, but for desire. This was the fancy girls trade, a dark, forgotten chapter of American slavery, one that reveals how cruelty, greed, and racism collided in horrifying ways. In the years before the Civil War, the United States was home to one of the largest slave markets in the world. Most enslaved people were sold to work in fields or homes. But a small, secretive part of that system focused on a different kind of sale, the trade in light-skinned enslaved women, often of mixed ancestry. Slave traders called them fancy girls. The term sounds delicate, but it masked something horrific. These women and girls were sold specifically for sexual exploitation. In cities like New Orleans, Richmond, and Louisville, private rooms and auction houses displayed them separately from other enslaved people. Advertisements in newspapers used coded phrases like bright mulatto, for a gentleman's use, or highly educated and refined. Behind those words was human trafficking, organized, profitable, and brutally real. Most of these women were teenagers. Some were only 13 or 14 years old. Traders forced them to dress well, sometimes teaching them manners or a few words of French to make them seem exotic. They were displayed, inspected, and sold to wealthy white men, often for thousands of dollars, far more than a field worker would bring. Once sold, their lives were not their own. Many became concubines or mistresses, living under the constant threat of violence or resale. Some bore children who were also born into slavery, repeating the same cruel cycle. And yet, despite the horror, some of these women fought back, escaping, telling their stories, or leaving behind memoirs that historians still study today. When the Civil War broke out, the trade finally began to collapse. By 1865, with the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery, the fancy girls markets vanished, but the trauma and silence remained. Today, their names are mostly forgotten, buried in ledgers and letters. But their stories remind us that slavery was not only about forced labor, it was also about power, exploitation, and control over human lives. This was the reality of the fancy girls trade in 1860 America, a system built on suffering, hidden behind polite words, and remembered today as one of the darkest truths of the nation's past.